Have you ever wondered what might be hidden behind a simple smile from those who serve you at the table? That night, in one of the most expensive restaurants in the city, the environment exuded sophistication. The high ceiling reflected the golden light of the crystal chandeliers, and the tables, impeccably covered by white towels, displayed arrangements of fresh roses. The air seemed loaded with a mixture of expensive perfumes, the refined aroma of the dishes, and the silent tension that only exists in places frequented by the elite. Every detail shouted wealth, from the silver cutlery aligned perfectly to the crystal cups that shone like jewelry under smooth lighting. Customers were influential entrepreneurs, socialites in stunning dresses, and families that appeared to live in a world far from common reality. Their conversations, always in a low tone, were full of secrets, business and family intrigues that would never be revealed in public. There was something magnetic in that atmosphere, as if every look, every gesture, hidden much more than it showed. Among them were waiters dressed in impeccable black, attentive to every detail like invisible pieces of a luxurious gear. And among these discreet employees, she was a young waitress with a firm but serene expression. Unlike the others, there was something about her that drew attention. It was not your simple work outfit, nor the bun stuck in a hurry. It was the silent, almost stubborn dedication with which it served every table, as if it carried a deep secret within it. The most attentive customers realized she never lost her posture. Even when a request was changed at the last minute, even when someone treated her with indifference, she kept the same polite tone, the same calm, the same dignity. But behind the discreet eyes and the contained smile, there was something kept, a mystery, a story that, if revealed, could turn the life of anyone upside down. That night, the restaurant seemed even more expecting expectation. The conversations were intense, the eyes crossed, as if millionaire businesses were being sealed in silence. But without anyone knowing, the real drama was yet to start. And the key piece of this plot would not be the tycoon at the central table, nor the politician who dinner hidden in the most reserved corner. No, the central piece would be precisely the waitress, the young woman everyone saw, but no one really saw. She passed between the tables with light steps, balancing trays with almost choreographed accuracy. Each movement seemed trained, but at the same time revealed an inner force. His countenance, as much as he sought neutrality, denounced a life marked by fights, difficult choices, and, perhaps, losses that few would have the courage to bear. It was as if it should be carried the weight of an invisible story that would soon come to light. As she discreetly collected a glass of wine forgotten on a table, her gaze crossed for a short time the reflection in the ornate mirror of the hall. In that reflection, it was not just the anonymous waitress, was a woman who hid inside an unexpected connection with someone about to enter the main door, someone who would completely change the course of that night. The laughs of the nearest tables drowned out the soft classical music played in the background. The waiters moved in sync, but she seemed to be in another rhythm, guided by something bigger. As if, inside her heart, there was an invisible countdown, preparing the ground for an inevitable encounter. And it was right now, when the hall seemed in perfect harmony, that the heavy door of the restaurant opened. The air changed, the eyes turned. The man who entered was known to everyone. His presence dominated the space even before he said a word. A billionaire used to be revered, feared, and obeyed. He had no idea that that night would be different. I didn't know that under the simple waitress uniform, the biggest debt of her life was hidden. The heavy door closed behind him, and the silence that spread in the hall said more than 1,000 words. The billionaire walked with firm steps, the tailored suit reflecting the brightness of the lights, the cold look of those who are used to having the world at their feet. Customers whispered with each other. Some leaned their heads in reverence, others just diverted their eyes, intimidated by that man's presence. He sat at the central table as if it were a throne reserved exclusively for him. Two waiters rushed to serve him, but it was the young waitress who received the impatient look. The tension began there. She took a deep breath, adjusted the apron, and walked toward the man who unknowingly carried an unbreakable connection with her. The first contact was cold. Even before hearing his voice, he evaluated her with disdain, as who measures the value of an object. When he opened his mouth, the tone was sharp. "Bring me the wine list, fast." There was no cordiality, just order. The waitress kept the composure, handed the menu with both hands, and responded with a respectful tone. But inside, the heart accelerated. The contrast was evident. On the one hand, a man used to despising. On the other, someone who had already given more than he could ever imagine. And here I ask you, who is following this story? If you were in her place, serving the same person who has already humiliated so many and that unknowingly owes her life to you, what would you do? Leave your answer in the comments. I really want to know. And of course, it already takes the opportunity to leave your like and subscribe to the channel, because we still have many stories of billionaires that will surprise you. She returned to the kitchen in silence, but something in her expression had changed. The meeting was just beginning, and what seemed to be another common night would soon become a confrontation between arrogance and gratitude, power and humanity, secrets and revelations. Have you ever felt the atmosphere change completely when a person enters an environment? This is exactly what happened in that luxurious restaurant. As soon as the billionaire crossed the main door, all looks turned to him. It was impossible not to notice. The man exuded power. The impeccable suit seemed to have been shaped on his body. The clock sparkled more than many parked cars outside, and the safe walk denounced that he was used to dominating anywhere. Customers watched him with a mixture of fascination and fear. Some dozed off discreetly, others just lowered their heads so as not to draw attention. It was as if that man's simple presence rearranged the energy of the hall. Even the waiters, who were already used to demanding customers, moved faster, trying to predict any need even before it was verbalized. And among all the employees, there she was, the young waitress. His eyes met with the imposing figure that he had just sat on the central table, and for a moment his heart seemed to stop. The world was still spinning around, but for her, that moment was different. There was something of personnel, intimate and painful, hidden behind the serene expression that she worked so hard to maintain. The billionaire raised his chin, watching the surroundings with silent arrogance. As the waitress approached, he didn't even wait for her to say something. "Bring me the wine list." His voice cut the air, cold and dry, like a military order. She nodded, polite. "No, sir." He barely looked at her. He took the menu when she handed it, as if it were her obligation to exist just to serve him. He flipped a few pages and within seconds dropped the menu on the table with a snap. "Chateau Lafite, 1996 crop," he said without even checking out if he was available. "And fast, please." "Yes, sir," he answered, keeping his calm. As he walked toward the counter, the waitress took a deep breath. I had already served demanding customers, but the way that man treated her was different. It was as if she had no face, as if invisible, just part of the furniture of the place. Minutes later, he returned with the chosen bottle. He opened it carefully without trembling and served the cup with the accuracy of those who had repeated that gesture hundreds of times. The billionaire took the cup, turned the liquid with the experienced hand, and sipped. Then he frowned and looked at her. "It is not at the correct temperature." He complained low, but enough for other tables to realize the harsh tone. "I asked for excellence, not mediocrity." Some clients around exchanged uncomfortable looks. The waitress swallowed dry, but responded with dignity. "I can arrange another bottle, sir, if you wish." He measured her from top to bottom, and a half-arrogant smile appeared on his lips. "Just do your work right," said in a sharp tone. She nodded again, without losing her posture. However, inside, each word sounded like an open wound. And here I ask you that you are following this scene. If you were you, could you stay calm in the face of such humiliation? Or would you react? Comment what you would do. As the waitress was returning to the kitchen, the buzz in the restaurant grew. Everyone tried to disguise, but the tension was palpable. The billionaire, in turn, seemed to feed on that environment of fear and respect. It was as if it had to prove that it was above all, including those who served it. Shortly thereafter, when she brought a new dish, the conflict intensified. "Here, sir." She put the plate in front of her carefully. He looked at the food, inhaled the aroma, and then released a sarcastic laugh. "Is that what they call luxury cuisine? Said loud enough for the Restoration NTE whole listen. Not even at the worst fifth hotel would I accept something like that." Customers stopped for a moment, shocked. The chief of the kitchen, who watched from afar, felt the blood boil, but remained behind the counter, unable to react. The waitress tried to intervene. "Sir, if the plate is not in agreement, I can take you back and bring another option." He hit his hand on the table, making the cup vibrate. "Do you think this solves? The problem is not just the dish, it is the incompetence of who serves." The words fell like sharp blades. She took a deep breath and answered with a firm but serene voice, "I'm here to make sure your experience is the best possible, sir." He raised his eyebrow as he had fun with her calm. "Experience. You speak as if you understand luxury. But just look at you." His eyes traveled the simple uniform. Any waitress would never understand what it means to live at this level." A heavy silence took over the hall. Some customers moved uncomfortable, others just observed, curious to know how far it would go. The waitress held the tray tightly, preventing her hands from shaking. Inside, a whirlwind of emotions wanted to explode, but she knew she couldn't. "Not yet." "Excuse me, sir," said, retreating a step. "I will provide another meal." He just smiled at the corner, pleased with the feeling of power. In the kitchen, she leaned for a moment at the stainless steel counter. The heart was beating rapidly, not just for public humiliation, but for something deeper. That arrogance, that coldness. She had seen it before, but in another context. It was not just any customer. He was the link that connected his gift to the past. As the minutes dragged on, the billionaire called the waiters with fingers, complained of lighting, even criticized the disposition of the tables. Each gesture of his was an attempt to reaffirm his superiority. At one point, more annoyed, he called the waitress again. "You, come here." She approached, taking a deep breath. "No, sir." He pointed to the wine glass. "Do you see that? I've already drank wines in private collections that cost more than your whole life could be worth. Do you understand the difference?" She just nodded. "I understand, sir." "No, you don't understand," he replied, leaning forward. "People like you will never understand." The silence in the hall was absolute. Each client was attached to the scene as spectators of a cruel theater. And here I ask, would you hold silent? "How is she doing?" Or would you have said something? Leave in the comments. The waitress took a deep breath, keeping her gaze firm, did not answer. And it was precisely this silence that seemed to irritate him even more. He leaned back in his chair, snorting. Unbelievable. No courage to answer has. But behind that silence, there was a secret kept under 7 keys. Something that would completely change the dynamics of that night. While discreetly collected the cup, the billionaire commented casually, as if talking alone. "At least I'm here to celebrate my new chance of life. If it wasn't for that surgery, it may not even be alive today." Her heart stopped for a moment. Her look turned quickly, but not fast enough for him to realize something different. What it was, he asked, suspicious. "Nothing, sir," he answered calmly. "I just want you to enjoy this new chance." He frowned, intrigued, but soon resumed his arrogant posture. "Of course I'll enjoy it. I always enjoy it." But the waitress knew. Those words had lit an impossible memory to erase. The man who now humiliated her in public was the same who, unknowingly, owed her own life. and the weight of this revelation was beginning to become unbearable. The suspense hovered in the air, invisible to other customers, but suffocating for her. Every second that passed her closer to the moment when the truth would come to light. Dinner was still far from over, and the more he spoke, the clearer the turn would be inevitable. The waitress returned to the kitchen, taking a deep breath once more, trying to find strength. She knew, at some point, the secret could no longer be hidden. And when that happened, nothing, absolutely nothing, it would be like before. What do you think will happen when he finds out the truth? Comment on your opinion, and don't forget to leave the like to follow the continuation of this story. The waitress took a deep breath, straightened the apron, and walked to the center table. Her steps were firm, but inside, each movement seemed heavy, as if she carried a secret unable to endure. He approached the billionaire, keeping the same polite smile as always, and asked kindly, "Do you want me to write down the request now?" He looked up slowly, staring at her with the fry ease of those who see only an obstacle in their way. "Finally," he murmured with an impatient sigh. "I was almost complaining about the slowness of this place." She kept the tone soft. "I apologize for the delay. We had some adjustments in the kitchen, but I'm ready to write down whatever you want." He raised the menu and hit his finger over one of the options, without even worrying about looking at her. "I want that. But please tell the chef that I expect perfection. I don't tolerate mistakes." "Understanding, sir," he answered humbly. But before she turned to go to the kitchen, he added, with a look at contempt, "Are you really sure you scored right? People like you usually get in the way easily." A cold traveled her spine. It was not just arrogance. There was a clear desire to humiliate, to stoop. "I do, yes, sir," he said, keeping his serenity. He let out a brief, almost mocking laugh. "Very good. We will see." When she walked away, some customers exchanged discreet glances. The tension was evident, but no one dared to intervene. It was like watching a dark piece in real time, the powerful crushing the fragile. In the kitchen, the waitress handed the request to the chef, who looked at her with concern. "Has it started?" asked the man, knowing the client's fame well. "Already," she said with a forced smile. "But everything is under control." The chef sighed. "This man thinks he can buy respect." She just nodded. I didn't want to feed comments, but inside her mind boiled. If he knew, if he just knew. Minutes later, the plate was ready. The waitress took him to the table, with the tray balanced and the heart rapidly. He placed before the billionaire, who watched her as who evaluates a defective object. "Here, sir," he said. He leaned, smelled the food, and arched his eyebrows. At least the smell is not horrible." Dumbled. He took the fork, tasted a piece, and then pushed the plate a few inches, sighing loudly. "It's not bad," he said indifferently, "but it's not good either. It's acceptable. For someone like you." She kept the professional smile. "I'm glad you agree, sir." He laughed, sarcastic. "Accordingly? Do you think this is a compliment? That's what you expect from life? That people just tolerate what you do?" The silence around was suffocating. The billionaire spoke loudly and everyone could hear. The waitress, however, did not retreat. "I'm here to serve you as best I can," he answered. "Calm down." "Of course." He took a sip of the wine and stared at her coldly. "This is the fate of people like you. Serving." She swallowed hard. The words hurt, but there was something deeper than humiliation. There was a memory, something that echoed stronger and stronger. The hospital room, the doctors, the decision that had changed her life and his. The billionaire continued his dinner, always finding something to criticize. Once it was the bread, another was the water temperature. Every detail became reason to reinforce its superiority. When she brought a new bottle of wine, he commented casually without even looking at her, "Did you know that I almost died a few months ago?" She froze for a moment, holding the bottle firmly. "I didn't know, sir." "Yeah." He raised the cup. "Complicated surgery. Doctors said I would not have a chance without a donor. Lucky for mine, who decided to sacrifice themselves. Her breath failed for a moment. A knot graduated in her throat, but she disguised. I imagine it was a blessing, sir. He nodded, as if it were just another personal achievement. Of course it was. Life has always favored me. I deserve it. She bit her lip inside but didn't answer, just kept serving. And you, in her place, could keep this silence. Or would you have told the truth at that moment? Comment your answer. The hours passed, and dinner dragged on a cruel dance of power and resistance. The waitress was still firm, but every word of him was like a knife that spinned in a hidden wound. When he brought the dessert, he could not resist another provocation. Tell me, girl, do you have family? She hesitated, surprised by the question. I do, yes, sir. I bet they work as much as you, all in mediocre functions, said, laughing alone. It is the destination of certain families. Some are born to rule, some to obey. She took a deep breath. Each one has its value, sir. He raised his eyebrows. Fun. Value? Do you really believe that? People like me are born with power? People like you? Well, you are content with crumbs. She squeezed the tray against her body, trying to control the emotions. Maybe you'll be mistaken. Sometimes those who least expect may be the one who offers us the most. For a moment, his eyes shone curiously, but soon he laughed, shaking his head. Cheap philosophy, don't waste me time with it. At that moment, one of the clients, bothered by the scene, approached the waitress discreetly as she collected a plate. Are you well? He whispered, worried. She forced a smile. I am, yes. Thanks. But the billionaire noticed the gesture and raised the voice. What's going on there? Are you complaining about me? By no means, sir, she said quickly. I was just collecting the plate. He snorted. I hope so. I have fame to watch out. The night advanced, and the suspense grew like a shadow. The billionaire talked more and more about him, about his wealth, about his victories, but he always returned to the same point. The surgery, the second chance life gave him. It was an extraordinary coincidence, commented at one point. The compatibility was perfect, almost unbelievable. She felt her legs tremble. He looked at him, and for a moment he thought of saying everything. But no, it was not time yet. He noticed her gaze and frowned. What it was? Nothing, sir, he said, looking away. But inside her the secret pulsed. He had no idea that the woman who now served her dessert was the same one who had given her life back. The restaurant was beginning to empty. Customers would leave one by one, but the central table remained busy, as if that dinner was never ending. The waitress felt the weight of the night, but she also knew that the moment was coming when she could no longer hide the truth. She approached to collect the last glass of wine, and he, already slightly altered by the drink, commented, You know, sometimes I think who saved me. Who will have had the courage to submit to that for someone who would never know? It must have been a poor guy, desperate for money. She stopped, holding the cup in the air. Maybe it wasn't for money, he answered with a firm voice. He stared at her, intrigued. And why would anyone do that? She hesitated. Her heart fired. Sometimes people make choices because they believe that saving a life is worth more than any reward. The billionaire laughed, incredulous. What naivete. In the real world, everything has a price. She didn't answer. It just took the cup to the counter while inside it the truth burned like fire. The night was not over yet. The secret was about to be revealed, but not there, not at that moment. It had yet to be said, but to be exposed before the billionaire stared at the largest debt of his life, and the audience, attached to every detail, knew. At any moment, the world of that arrogant man could crumble. And do you think she should tell the truth soon, or wait for the right time? Leave your opinion in the comments. The restaurant, once full of discreet murmurs and cutlery clicks, plunged into heavy silence as soon as he lifted his voice. "This is ridiculous," exclaimed the billionaire, pointing to the plate in front of him. "Do you call it service? This is an affront." The tone of contempt echoed through the hall, attracting immediate glances from all customers. Some diverted their eyes, uncomfortable; others could not fail to observe, curious and horrified by the scene that unfolded before them. The young waitress remained firm, breathing deep, but the tension squeezed her chest like an invisible fist. Every word of him looked like a blade, cutting not only his pride, but something deeper inside it. "Sir, I apologize if the dish is not in agreement." "I can arrange another option immediately," she said with the most polite and calm tone she managed to keep, even feeling the weight of the look of hundreds of people about themselves. "Another option?" He raised an eyebrow, the voice loaded with irony. "Do you think I came to this restaurant to be tolerant? I demand perfection." The sarcastic laugh that followed sounded almost like thunder for nearby customers. "Look at you, girl. The way it presents itself, dull, unlikely, with nothing that justifies your presence here. It is really shameful that someone like this is trying to serve people who live at my level." She took a deep breath, her jaw tight, trying to keep the composure. Inside, his heart hammered. She knew he had no idea who was really in front of him, that any girl, as he said, kept a secret impossible to ignore. She had been the person who saved her life months ago. But revealing that was not yet safe. "Sir, I'm here to serve you in the best way possible." Her voice was firm, despite the cold that spread over her body. "I can correct any errors that have been made." "To correct?" He leaned forward, his eyes piercing hers. "Do you really believe you can correct something? This is what I call naivete. People like you never understand what is really required." The voice increased, loaded with disdain. "Have you seen someone in my circle fail this way? Of course, it is the difference between us and you, girl, between excellence and mediocrity." She swallowed hard. Every word of his was like an invisible punch, and the heavy silence that formed around only amplified humiliation. Some customers diverted their eyes, embarrassed by him, but no one dared to intervene. "Maybe, sir," she said, keeping calm. "Perfection is not just in the appearance of dishes or service. Sometimes she is intended to do the best, even when the circumstances do not collaborate." He laughed, a harsh, almost cruel sound. "Intent? Do you really believe that? Life doesn't work like that, girl. Do you think the intention is worth something to people at my level? For those who live surrounded by wealth, power, and decisions that change destinations?" He leaned even more, the severe expression. "People like you only serve to remember that there are limits to what they can achieve." She felt a twinge of anger, but could not let it show. Her dignity was still her only weapon. "With all due respect, sir," he said, "perhaps there is something you haven't realized yet. Sometimes those who least expect you can offer us what we need most, even if we don't know it." The silence settled for a moment. The billionaire frowned, intrigued, but soon a cynical smile took his face. "Interesting." He leaned over his chair, crossing his arms. "You talk as if you have any power over my life. But you see, nothing you say or will change who is at the top. People like me don't depend on anyone." She swallowed, trying not to reveal the impact of the words. Deep down, each sentence of his reinforced the contrast between his power and the secret she carried. He had no idea that his life, in fact, depended on her. "You talk about dependence, sir," she said carefully, "but it's not always obvious who is really saving who." The billionaire arched an eyebrow, curious, but did not show too much. "And do you think this applies to me?" he asked, leaning forward again, the sharp gaze. She hesitated for a moment. "Maybe, sir. Perhaps there are strengths in our lives that only reveal themselves when we least expect it." He let out a short and sarcastic laugh. "Too poetic for a waitress, don't you think?" He leaned on his chair and sipped the wine, still watching her up and down. "But frankly, poetry changes nothing. It does not change the difference between us." As she collected the tray, some clients around them murmured with each other. Some were shocked by his coldness. Others admired her calm in the face of such arrogance. There was an almost palpable tension, a feeling that something bigger was about to happen. The waitress returned to the kitchen, breathing deep. The chief of the cooking approached, worried. "He's being unbearable. Are you well?" She forced a smile, but inside her a storm was formed. "I am, yes. Just every word of him reminds me that there are things I can't reveal yet." The chef frowned. "You mean that story?" She nodded slightly without saying any more. "I knew I couldn't risk, neither there nor at that moment. But fate seemed to play with her closer and closer to the moment of the truth. Later, when he brought the main course, he made a comment that froze the air around the table. "Did you know I'm almost not here today?" What would hardly come to this meal? She swallowed dry, pretending not to understand. "No, sir." "Yes," he sighed, still arrogantly, but with a slight tone of reflection. "A complicated surgery, a compatible donor. Without it, I wouldn't be alive." Her heart hit faster. For a moment the cutlery on the tray almost fell from his hands. She knew he had no idea who was in front of him, but I needed to keep calm. "I imagine it was a great blessing, sir," said, still controlling the tone. He was. He took a sip of wine and smiled, almost without realizing it. "Extraordinary luck. It is not every day that someone is willing to do this for you." She swallowed, feeling the knot in her throat tighten. Every word of him was like a spark that could set on fire. As she collected the table, he called her again, this time in a low tone, almost confidential. "Tell me, have you ever done something that would change someone's life completely?" She froze. Each muscle of the body seemed to paralyze. "Maybe, sir," he said carefully. "But some stories, some things remain between the donor and the one who was saved." He leaned on, curious. "And have you saved someone like that?" She took a deep breath, forcing her voice firm. "Sometimes, sir. No more than that." Just in silence. He frowned suspiciously, but decided not to insist for now. "Curious," he murmured, omping another sip of wine. In the salon, customers had already finished the meal, but some still discreetly watched the scene. The billionaire was still arrogant, but there was something in his look that seemed intrigued. He didn't know that every gesture of her carried not only patience, but a secret that can completely change the perspective of that night. The waitress silently collects the dishes, increasingly aware that the moment of revelation was approaching. Every sentence of him, every sarcastic laugh, increased tension, making it impossible to predict what would happen next. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, she breathed deep, preparing mentally. He knew that soon the silence would need to be broken, but there was still a way to go, a right time to reveal the truth. "Would you do the same, keeping the secret, or react now?" she murmured to herself, almost as if asking the viewers. "So, would you do the same? Comment what you think will happen." The billionaire continued to speak, without realizing the silent storm that was formed in front of him. He was used to being feared, admired and obeyed, but was not ready for the approaching shock. The waitress approached again, bringing the dessert, and he launched another cold observation. "I hope you did it correctly." The voice, laden voice, made the atmosphere tremble, and some customers looked away, uncomfortable with the tone. "Sir, I'm sure you'll be satisfied," she answered firmly, though her heart was fired. Every detail was carefully prepared. He leaned over and looked at her carefully. For the first time, there was a tip of real curiosity in his eyes, mixed with usual arrogance. "Interesting. You talk too much to someone of your level." She just smiled, keeping control. "Sometimes, sir, who seems simple to keep more than you think." The silence stopped for a few seconds. He frowned, intrigued, but did not know that every word of her, every discreet gesture, carried the truth he would never imagine at that moment. And so, the night continued, loaded with tension, curious looks, and a shadow of secret that hovered between them. Each sentence, every gesture, every silence approached them to the inevitable moment when the great turn would explode, a revelation capable of completely turning the life of that arrogant man and making him see the true importance of that woman that until then he despised. She took a deep breath, the air weighing on her lungs, while everyone's eyes in the hall seemed to weigh even more about her. The billionaire's words still echoed in his mind, sharp as blades. Each criticism, every sarcastic laugh, every comment about his appearance and competence, on the outside she remained calm, erect, impeccable in posture and education. Inside, a whirlwind of emotions consumed it. Tears threatened to escape, but she told them, lightly squeezing her lips. "Sir, the dessert you have requested is ready," she said, keeping her voice firm, almost neutral, although each word required a huge effort. He leaned forward, looking at that sharp and calculating look that seemed able to read people's soul. "I hope you are up to what I am used to. I don't want excuses, I don't want flaws. I just want quality," he said, the cold voice full of authority. "Yes, sir," she answered, without trembling, but with her heart rapidly. "I'm sure you'll be satisfied." He raised his eyebrow, evaluating it, as if every detail of his face, posture, and expression could be judged. "Interesting. You can keep calm, even under pressure. It is not common. Many people would collapse right now." It only allowed a small, silent sigh. "I believe it is important to keep the composure, regardless of the situation, sir." Her voice was loaded with firmness, but also something more subtle, almost imperceptible. A silent force that did not depend on arrogance or wealth. The billionaire smiled in singing, an almost ironic smile. Silent strength, He sipped the wine, and the sound echoed through the hall as a power marker. "Tell me, do you always keep this posture when someone humiliates or criticizes? Or is it just a temporary skill?" She lightly lowered her look, but without completely dodging. "Sir, I believe dignity must be preserved even before people who do not recognize it." She carefully chose the words. "This prevents conflicts from growing up and makes us reflect on who we really are." He laughed softly, almost mocking. "Reflection?" He leaned over the table. "You really talk as if you had any influence on the world of the powerful. Don't you find it curious that someone like you has so much conviction, even though you are in an insignificant position?" She swallowed hard, feeling the knot in her throat tighten. "Maybe, sir. The position does not define the value of a person." She paused. "And sometimes those who seem more fragile or insignificant have more courage than many who are at the top." Silence spread for a few seconds, enough for close customers to realize that something deeper was unfolding, something that went beyond the restaurant service. Some looked curious to her, intrigued by the almost heroic calm before the man who humiliated without remorse. Why did she accept this? Why didn't you explode? How would anyone do? The billionaire leaned even more, as if he wanted to tear her every secret with his eyes. "Courage," he said, almost to himself. "Curious," he frowned. "You talk too much to someone of your level," and without realizing it, let it out a detail that made her stop by a fraction of a second. "I had a second chance of life, thanks to someone." She swallowed dry. The air seemed to have disappeared. Every word of his was a silent blow. He did not know that the woman in front of him carried exactly this secret, and as much as he tried to disguise, his body reacted. The heart shot, his hands shaking slightly, but she kept control. "I understand, sir," he said firmly, but with a slightly shaky voice. "Life gives us unexpected opportunities, and some acts remain invisible to the world." He looked at her, intrigued, as if detected something different in her reaction, but could not identify what it was. "Invisible, murmured. "You may be right. But you see, life is an opportunity for power, ease, and recognition. People like you. Well, you are content with crumbs of value, thinking you can influence others with beautiful words." She swallowed again, feeling the weight of each syllable. "Perhaps, Lord, The most significant words and actions are not those recognized by the world, but those that change lives in ways no one else sees. He arched an eyebrow, curious. Change lives, he repeated, almost pondering. You talk as if you had done something extraordinary. Make no mistake, girl, in this world only tangible results matter. He took a sip of wine, still evaluating every movement of her. She kept the smile discreet, but her thought was incessantly spinning. He doesn't know. He will never know. Yet, each step, every gesture, every carefully controlled sentence was a dance of survival, patience, and silent strength. As she collected the empty glasses, he called her again, the voice firm, almost like a command. You look more resistant than expected. Have you ever faced really significant challenges or just got used to enduring small insults? She stopped for a moment, keeping her eyes low but firm. Lord, we all face challenges, visible or invisible. Some face public battles while others face silently, but the important thing is how we react, no matter who watches us. He leaned, the penetrating gaze. Interesting, silent, firm. But tell me, has anyone for real saved? Not in words, but of concrete, decisive action. She swallowed, controlling her breath. For a moment the truth threatened to escape, but she contained her. Sometimes, sir, but not for recognition or glory, just because it was necessary. The billionaire frowned, intrigued. Necessary, he murmured, as if he thought loudly. Interesting. I never met someone like that before. Ordinary people, girl, do nothing without expecting something in return. He paused, studying her closely. And you look really different. She just smiled discreetly. Perhaps, sir, it is because some actions remain invisible to the right time. The silence extended, loaded with tension. He looked at her, as who tries to decipher a puzzle, while she remained motionless, like a silent wall, keeping the secret that could change everything. You look familiar, he said suddenly, frowning. There's something about you, something that brings me to something that... No, it doesn't matter. He shook his head, trying to ignore the thought that had come. She felt the heat rise to the faces, but continued with the composure. Each second, each gesture was calculated to maintain control of the situation. It was not yet time to reveal the truth. Meanwhile, customers observed discreetly, curious and fascinated by the contrast between the arrogant billionaire and the calm waitress. Some dozed together, commenting on her patience. Others just couldn't look away. The suspense was almost tangible. Something big was about to happen, something that would change the dynamics of power in the room in a moment. She moved discreetly, preparing to take dessert to the kitchen, but he called her again. Can you tell me your full name? He asked, in a less arrogant tone, but full of genuine curiosity. She paused, surprised by the sudden interest. Yeah. Clara, sir. Clara Mendes. He repeated the name low, as if they savor each syllable. Clara Mendes, she murmured, contemplative. A simple name. But there's something about you. Something I can't identify. She smiled slightly, keeping control. Maybe, Lord, just the way people carry their stories inside, without anyone noticing. He frowned, confused but intrigued. Stories, he murmured. Could it be? Some people have stories that, well, they change lives, even if no one realizes. Clara felt the knot in her throat tighten, but still remained firm. Each word was a delicate dance between revealing too much and maintaining the composure. Each gesture carefully calculated. Would you keep a secret as important as this? She murmured to herself, almost as if challenging the viewers who accompanied the scene. And you, in her place, could stay calm and strong. Comment what you think will happen. The billionaire rose momentarily to answer a phone call, and Clara took the opportunity to breathe deeply, holding the tray firmly. Every second of silence seemed to crawl like hours. She knew the time of truth was approaching, but there were still steps to be taken, observations to be made, emotions to be measured. When he hung up, he looked back at her, and something changed in his countenance. Curiosity and confusion mixed, as if he began to feel the severity of the secret that remained between them. Invisible, but powerful. "Clara Mendez," he said, almost muttering, as if trying to decipher a code. "There's something I can't ignore." She only nodded slightly, keeping outdoor serenity, but inside she knew. The decisive moment was approaching. The tension in the salon increased, and the audience, silent and attentive, was looking forward to seeing what would happen. And at that moment, Clara realized that every gesture, every word, every silence approached her to a turn that would forever change the life of that arrogant man, and hers. The clock seemed to drag on that night, and the billionaire was not yet satisfied. Every detail, however small, seemed a reason to reaffirm his authority and test the limits of Clara's patience. She had already done dozens of comings and goings to his table, every timed movement, every word carefully chosen, but nothing seemed enough. "Do you really think this arrangement is correct?" he asked as he slightly pushed his cup of coffee. "It looks like it's crooked. This is not how a luxury table must present itself." "I can correct immediately, sir," Clara replied, keeping her posture impeccable despite the growing knot in her throat. "Do you want me to reposition the items?" "Of course," he sighed exaggeratedly, as if the simple fact of giving orders was a burden to him. "And make sure it is perfect this time. I don't want excuses, just result." She carefully took the cup and adjusted the position, measuring the distance between the plate and the glass, ensuring that everything was symmetrical. On the outside, his expression was calm, almost serene. Inside, every second seemed to consume energy she didn't even know she still had. "Better like that, sir?" he asked, trying to keep his tone neutral. He looked for a moment, leaning out to inspect the table as a rigorous evaluator. It can be acceptable, but I noticed something else. The napkin is slightly wrinkled." He touched his fingertip, causing a slight shudder on her. "Do you really think a customer of my level can tolerate such a small detail?" "I can arrange another napkin immediately, sir," Clara answered, without letting herself shake. "I want your experience to be perfect." "Perfect?" He laughed, short and sarcastic. "It's not just perfection. It's about showing that you are in control, and so far I see only mediocrity in its execution." She swallowed hard. Every word of him sounded like a blow, but she remained firm. "Patience was your shield, the composure your weapon." As he walked away, he called her again. "And the glass of wine. Do you really believe it is at the ideal temperature?" He leaned forward, his eyes fixed on hers. "This is not just a detail, it is critical." "Yes, sir," she replied, controlling the tremor that threatened to escape. "I can arrange another bottle to make sure it's perfect." "Good. Do that. And fast." He pointed out impatiently, making it clear that he would not accept flaws. She returned to the kitchen, handing the bottle to the sound of the heavy silence that wrapped the restaurant. The boss watched her, worried, and whispered, "He will never stop. You know that, right?" "Yes," said Clara, breathing deeply. "But it's not time to reveal anything. I need to keep the composure to the right moment." When he returned to the table with the new bottle, he received her with a critical look. "That's better, but I still feel something is not completely right." He tilted his head, evaluating her. "Do you really understand what it means to serve someone from my level?" "I'm trying my best, sir," Clara answered, controlling every muscle of the body. "My goal is to provide the best experience possible." "Effort?" He snorted impatiently. "You talk like that was enough. It's not enough, just try, Clara. Here you need to get it right." He smiled sarcastically. "A small error and all the impression of competence disappears." She adjusted the tray, serving it again, and tried not to let her eyes fill with tears. Inside, I felt the weight of each humiliation, every sarcastic laugh, every critical comment that echoed through the hall. But she knew she needed to keep control, even if each muscle asked to react. "Better like that?" he asked, keeping his calm absolute. He momentarily got up to get something from his folder, and when he came back, he called her again. "And the coffee sugar, did you really check if it's the right type? Ordinary people do not pay attention to details like this." "Yes, sir," she replied, already used to the small provocations. "I checked and made sure everything was correct." He took the cup, tasted and frowned. "It's not the way I like it yet. Maybe you need more experience, or maybe you don't have talent, UFI. "I can redo immediately, sir," she said, keeping her voice firm, but her heart hitting rapidly. "I want you to be exactly as you want." "Very well," he murmured, crossing his arms, satisfied only for reaffirming his power. "This shows initiative, but don't get used to it, Clear. There is still much to learn." The silence turned to the hall, heavy, almost palpable. Customers who observed discreetly began to whisper, admired by the patience and posture of the waitress. "Why didn't she explode? Why did you accept humiliation after humiliation without reacting?" Curiosity grew, the suspense increased, and everyone realized that something else was hidden in that apparent calm. As he collected the utensils, he called again, pointing to the wine bottle. "Wait there. Is the amount correct? Did you measure exactly how I asked?" He leaned, his eyes fixed on hers, trying to cause a sign of weakness. "Yes, sir," she answered firmly. "Each measure has been confirmed and accurately adjusted." "Very well, but I still feel something is missing," he sighed, turning the cup between his fingers. "Maybe it's your trust. You seem to hesitate." She swallowed hard. "Sir, I trust my ability to serve you in the best way possible." He smiled, fun. "Trust," murmured. "Interesting. But you see, trust is not enough if there is no perfection." Each round trip, each adjustment, each comment seemed to project an invisible pressure on Clear, and yet she kept the composure, controlling the tears that threatened to escape, the lightly shaking hands, and a fast heart. Inside, he knew that patience was not just a virtue, but a strategic necessity. The secret it carried, the truth about his connection with him, could not yet be revealed. "Clara," he said suddenly, interrupting his movement, "do you understand the difference between serving and impressed?" He frowned, almost as if expecting a philosophical response. "Yes, sir," she answered firmly. "To serve is to ensure that the needs are cared for and carefully. To impress is to go beyond, anticipating desires and needs even before they are expressed." He leaned on, evaluating her intensely. Curious answer. It is not common to hear something from someone in their position. You seem to have depth." He paused, studying every detail of his face. "But still, there's something I can't decipher." She kept the silence, just nodding lightly. The surrounding audience was completely absorbed by the tension that spread throughout the central table. Some dozed. Why does she accept all this without retaliation? Others just watched, fascinated by the contrast between the billionaire arrogant and the calm and worthy waitress. The billionaire called it again, this time to adjust the lighting of the table. "You see, the light needs to be perfect for the meal." He indicated the position of the chandeliers and reflected the shine on the plate. "I can't tolerate any inadequate shadow." "Of course, sir," she answered, adjusting the position of the candles and the reflection of light on the plate accurately. "Better," he sighed, leaning back. "But there is still a slight difference. Don't you realize?" "I can check it again, sir," she said, keeping her calm. "I want to make sure you are as you want." As he walked away, the billionaire commented aloud, almost to himself, "Interesting. Clara Mendez, there is something on you that is not easily revealed." He smiled in his corner. "I think I still have a lot to find out." She just smiled discreetly, knowing that the time of the great revelation had not yet arrived. Each gesture, each movement, and every carefully controlled word were a step at the moment when he would finally understand the truth, that his life, in fact, depended on it. "Would you do the same, keeping calm in the face of so much humiliation?" she murmured to herself, as if challenging the audience. "And you, in her place, be able to endure it all?" Comment what you think will happen next. While the billionaire was still demanding, complaining about every detail, Clara knew that each adjustment, every trip to the table, was not just about food or service. It was about time, strategy, and patience. The right time for the truth was coming, and the suspense grew with every second that passed, leaving everyone around the hall seemed to have diminished in size as Clara was approaching the table for the nth time. Each step he took made the wooden floor grind under his feet, and every billionaire's look seemed to penetrate his own skin, as if he could see every fear, every pain, and every memory she tried to keep hidden. He watched her in a way that mixed curiosity, arrogance, and a veiled restlessness that she could not decipher. "Clara," started he without ceremony, with that serious tone that filled the environment, "have you ever wondered how much a life can change in a moment?" He paused, dramatic, stirring the wine in the cup, the liquid reflex creating waves that reflected the soft light of the restaurant. "In my case, I can say that life literally gave me another chance." She felt her heart accelerate, but kept her posture firm, the impeccable apron, her eyes attentive. Every word of his seemed to open a crack on the invisible wall he built around him, a wall she knew well, because she had been responsible for knocking her down, even if he completely ignored it. "What do you mean, sir?" he asked, keeping his calm, but his voice loaded with interest. "A delicate surgery, a transplant," he said casually, as if talking about a trip or any dinner. "Something that saved my life. No one would imagine that I could be so close to the end. But thanks to someone, I'm here. I live." He smiled briefly, the corner of his mouth bending in a way that suggested arrogance, but also a silent gratitude he himself tried to ignore. Clara swallowed hard. Every word of him was a snap in his heart, reminding her of the day she had submitted to the procedure that guaranteed the continuity of his life, a decision that had changed not only hers, but his forever. The weight of memory almost made tears escape, but it contained each one, taking a deep breath so as not to let anything. "I imagine it was a transformative experience," she said carefully, by choosing words that could reveal no more than she could bear. "A chance to start over, to value every moment." He nodded, looking at the window with the light reflecting in his eyes. "Exactly." He took a deep breath, and his voice became lower, almost introspective. "Some have no idea how fragile life can be. A second and everything goes." He leaned forward a little, supporting his elbows on the table. "Have you ever been through something that has changed your perspective on life, Clara?" She felt the weight of the question. Inside, each memory came back. The hospital, the fear, the operating room, the doctors explaining that there was a minimal chance of survival. And she knew, with every fiber in her body, that he had no idea who was in front of him. Still, he answered calmly and sincerely contained, "Yes, sir. Experiences like this make us realize what really matters, but some lessons can only be understood in silence, without anyone noticing." He frowned, intrigued. "Silence, he murmured, almost to himself. "Some people keep secrets that change whole lives but remain invisible. Is that what you mean?" "Maybe, sir." Clara took a deep breath, keeping her tone firm. "Sometimes we least expect those who give us the opportunity to continue, to survive, to start over." He stared at her for a few seconds, his penetrating eyes as if trying to decipher something hidden under that calm facade. "Interesting." He leaned back, taking a sip of wine, and his gaze remained fixed on her. "You talk owned by acts that save lives, but I can't imagine someone so common," he said, choosing the word carefully. "Being able to be so extraordinary." Dirk, Clara contained the contained laugh that threatened to escape but kept her posture. Every word of him reinforced the suspense she needed to preserve, but also left tracks of clues that could make him suspect. "Sir," he answered calmly, "sometimes the greatness is not what you see, but what remains invisible to your eyes." He leaned again, curious. Invisible, as something that changes a lifetime without anyone noticing. He paused, sighing. I should know that. But the curious thing is that many times who we least expect is the one who really saves us. Clara felt the knot in her throat tighten. The time of revelation had not yet arrived, but every phrase of him seemed to bring her closer to the moment he would finally notice the truth. Still, he needed to keep control. "Exactly, sir," she said, firming the apron and setting the tray accurately. Sometimes the greatest acts of courage are silent. The billionaire leaned forward, the confused but increasingly interested look. "And you, Clara Mendes, have you done something that really saved someone?" he asked, as if he tried to probe her past, without realizing that the answer was right before his eyes. She hesitated for a moment, feeling the weight of the question echoing like thunder in the chest. "Sometimes, sir." Her voice was firm, but she carried a slight tremor. "Sometimes silently, without recognition, without applause." He smiled, but there was something different in the smile this time. It was no longer just arrogance. There was a genuine curiosity, mixed with a tip of confusion. "Interesting. Silent, firm, without seeking recognition," he murmured. "It's rare to find someone like that. Ordinary people, girl, usually get lost in ego and vanity." Clara took a deep breath, trying to keep calm. "Maybe, sir, that's why certain people can do things that no one would do anymore." He supported his chin in his hands, thoughtful, looking at her as if he tried to decipher a riddle that had long been ahead of his eyes. "Curious. You talk about acts that change lives, but no one realizes." He paused, studying every detail of her. "And I—" He hesitated, and the expression turned into something rare, a tip of vulnerability mixed with unbelief. "I had a second chance, didn't I? A complicated surgery, a transplant that saved my life. But I never imagined that someone could have had so much impact on me and remain invisible." The air seemed to freeze. Clara felt every muscle of the body tension. He was getting closer to discovering the secret, and yet he didn't know that his wife before him was exactly the person who had given him that second chance. "Sir," she said carefully, "some actions remain invisible until the right moment reveals them." He frowned, clearly intrigued. "Invisible. Right," he murmured, the low voice almost thoughtful. "But how do you know when the right moment comes? How to find out who really made the difference?" She looked away for a moment, keeping her smile discreet. "When we realize the true importance of someone, Lord, the right moment reveals itself." He laughed slightly, but it was not a laugh of arrogance. It was another mixture of confusion and admiration. "You're strange, Clara Mendes. Unlike anyone I've ever met. I don't know if it's audacity, courage, or pure ingenuity, but there is something in you that I can't ignore." She swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his gaze, as if he could read his soul. Each step, every gesture, every carefully measured word was leading them to the inevitable turn, but still needed to hold the truth. "Would you do the same if you were in my place?" she murmured, almost like a silent challenge to the viewers and her own situation. "Comment what you think will happen." He leaned back, taking a deep breath, still intrigued. Maybe it's time to reconsider what really matters." He paused, looking at her as if he began to suspect, but not entirely aware of the connection they shared. "Sometimes life introduces us to people we do not recognize, but who shape us in ways we would never imagine." Clara nodded slightly, maintaining absolute control of the situation. Every sentence of him, every look, each pause, increased the tension, bringing them closer to the moment he would find the truth about who she really was. "Sir, some people are like this. Silent, invisible, but absolutely essential," she said firmly. "And it's just a matter of time until their importance is revealed." He was silent, the fixed gaze in it as if he tried to decipher something that logic did not achieve. And at that moment, Clara realized that they were closer than ever of the turn that would change their lives forever. The suspense grew, every breath, every movement, every look being meaningful, foreshadowing that the final revelation was about to explode, and that he would be shockingly discovered who really held his life in his hands months ago. Clara approached the table again, bringing a set of newly prepared dishes. There was something different in his gaze at that moment. It was a subtle glow, almost imperceptible to anyone inattentive, but carried the intensity of a secret that had long been waiting for the right time. His countenance still kept his usual calm, the controlled smile, but those deep, deep eyes revealed something that could not be ignored. The billionaire, as always, watched her with that mixture of arrogance and curiosity, but something in it changed slightly by noticing the nuance in his gaze. He lightly frowned, intrigued, while the surrounding silence seemed to lengthen, carrying the weight of what was not said. "Clara," he said, leaning against his chair, "there is something to you that I can't explain. It's not just the way it serves, it's not just your patience. It's something else, something that looks bigger than yourself." She stopped for a moment, holding the firm tray, as if balanced every detail was also a way to contain the storm that felt inside. "Sir," he said, keeping his voice low but firmly, "sometimes what seems invisible to the eyes is precisely what matters most." He arched his eyebrow, a penetrating gaze, as if each word of her were a clue that needed to decipher. "Invisible? He murmured almost to himself. "You talk as if you had done something that changed the life of somebody, and yet it remains calm, silent, almost indifferent. How is it possible?" Clara took a deep breath, feeling the weight of those words. For a moment, the world around him seemed to disappear. The till of cutlery, the client's murmurs, the brightness of the chandeliers. Everything mingled in an indistinct background, while the absolute focus was that man who unknowingly depended on her to remain alive. "Sir," she said, lightly lowering her look, "some stories don't have to be told aloud. Sometimes they exist to change lives without anyone noticing." The billionaire leaned forward, supporting the elbows on the table. Curiosity now dominated the usual arrogance. "Stories? He murmured, his lowest, almost thoughtful tone. "You seem to know a lot about secrets, about people who make a difference without recognition. But the curious thing is that I can't identify if you talk about your own experiences." Clara remained immobile, breathing deeply. Every word of him was like a test, a veiled recognition of something he didn't understand yet. The silence loaded between them seemed to create an almost physical tension, visible to everyone who watched at a distance. "Sir," she said finally, carefully, "sometimes who we least expect is able to impact our lives in ways we don't even imagine. And it is not always necessary to reveal this impact immediately." He tilted his head, studying it with increasing attention. "Curious. You speak as if you have saved someone, or at least deeply influenced someone's life, and yet keep calm in the face of everything." He took a deep breath. "I know the meaning of a second chance. Clear. I went through something that gave me a new life. But you, the girl, seem to know that in a way that I still don't fully understand." She swallowed, feeling her heart to fire, but kept her posture. Every word of his was calculated to give him clues, without immediately revealing what had happened months ago. She needed patience. Every detail mattered, every gesture was measured, each pause carried weight. "Sir," she said, "life is full of people who remain invisible to our eyes, but carry a decisive role. We do not always recognize immediately who saved us, who protected us, who was present when we needed the most." The billionaire was silent, absorbing each syllable. For the first time, the arrogant countenance gave way to something that mixed fascination and restlessness. He took a deep breath, trying to soothe the intensity of what she had said. "Invisible, decisive. He murmured. "Looks like you talk about something that happened to me, but in a way I can't confirm." He frowned. "It's like I'm remembering something I forgot, or someone I never imagined knowing." Clara smiled slightly, keeping her serenity. "Maybe, sir, that's exactly that." Indeed, some moments of life only reveal themselves totally at the right time. He stared at her, and for a moment, arrogance gave in to genuine curiosity. "You know," it started, pausing, as if looking for the right words. "There is something about you that bothers me and intrigues me at the same time. I don't know if it's audacity or courage, or if it's something I don't understand yet." He paused, watching her every gesture. "But there is something that makes me want to find out the truth." Clara felt a shiver travel the spine. He was closer to realizing what she had done than he had ever imagined, but it was not the time yet. "Sir," she said, slightly lowering her eyes, "some truths only reveal themselves when all the factors are aligned. Until then, we need to learn to live with mystery and expectation." He sighed, supporting his chin in his hand, thoughtful. Mystery. The restaurant followed its sophisticated pace, customers still attentive to the intense interaction between the billionaire and Clara. But there was something different that night. The air carried an invisible tension, as if each word had a weight that no one else perceived. Clara moved accurately, collecting glasses, adjusting cutlery and serving dishes, but the shine in her eyes was not unnoticed. It was a glow that carried memories that only she knew. Silent but deep memories that she carried since the day she made the donation that saved the life of the man in front of her. The billionaire observed every gesture, every break, every expression. He had begun to realize subtle nuances in his posture and his answers, details that made no sense to someone who didn't know his past, but now seemed familiar. Something inside it began to awaken, a diffuse but powerful feeling that there was a greater connection with that woman he could never have imagined. "Clara," he called, his voice lower than before, almost hesitant. "There is something that... it bothers me. I can't identify, but I feel that you know more than it should. About me." He interrupted himself, visibly confused. Clara approached, gently placing the tray on the table, keeping her eyes low, but not completely diverting from his gaze. "Sir," he said, with his voice calmly but loaded with intensity, "you..." He sighed, leaning over the table. "You talk so accurately about decisions, secrets, moments that change lives, and somehow I know you were present when I needed it, but I can't understand how." She swallowed hard, feeling her heart to fire. Every word of him brought her closer to the decisive moment, but it was not yet the right time to reveal himself completely. She needed to conduct each sentence, every gesture, every look, to ensure that the turn was impactful and complete. "Sir," she said, keeping her calm, "sometimes the moments that change someone's life don't need to be visible. Some actions are silent, invisible but essential." She took a strategic break. "Some people do not imagine that someone was present at the most critical moment, saving their lives without ever knowing." The billionaire frowned, surprised by the accuracy of his words. "Saving your life. You say that as if..." He hesitated, confused. "But who could..." He took a deep breath, trying to understand what he felt. "You speak like someone who knows the weight of an extreme act, a decision that changes someone else's fate." Clara nodded slightly, keeping the composure. "It's true, sir. Some actions remain invisible, but carry the deepest impact." She lowered her eyes a little, measuring every word. "Sometimes it is not just about saving life, but of ensuring that the person continues to live fully, to enjoy the second chance he has received." The billionaire leaned, intrigued, the fixed eyes on it. "Second chance," he murmured, almost to himself. "I lived it. A transplant, a surgery that could have been fatal. And now you speak as if you were aware of everything, as if you were..." He stopped abruptly, feeling something awakening in his mind, a forgotten memory or too familiar to be ignored. Clara took a deep breath, holding the tray firmly, and let out, almost without thinking, a sentence that only someone directly involved at that moment could say. "I remember every detail of the day you woke up in the ICU, sir." Your voice was low, loaded with the contained emotion. The irregular beat, the weak smile that indicated that you had resisted and still had a chance to continue. The billionaire choked on what he heard. His eyes widened, his breath became heavy, and for a moment the entire air of the hall seemed to disappear. He looked at her incredulously, feeling a shock through each fiber of his body. What did you say? His voice failed, shaking in a way he had never imagined possible. I was there, sir, said Clara, now with a firm but still serene look. I was the donor who assured you that you had a second chance. I was by your side, even if you never knew. The silence took over the hall. Current customers could not hear, but the tension was palpable, as if the loaded air carried the severity of that moment to every corner of the restaurant. Clara remained calm, keeping her posture, while the billionaire sat incredulously, struggling to process the words she had just heard. You, he started, the low voice almost a whisper. You, was you. His eyes shone with unbelief, mixed with an emotion he had never publicly demonstrated. How is it possible? Clara nodded slightly, holding the tray as if each gesture was a reminder that she had kept the secret all those months. Yes, sir. I knew it would be better not to tell, let you find out at the right time. But the moment has come. She took a strategic break, allowing each word to fall like a weight, a silent revelation that changed everything. He stood abruptly, still astonished, feeling the ground under his feet as if it were unstable. This is impossible, he said, running his hand over his face. I never imagined that the person in front of me was responsible for my life. Clara kept her calm, but there was an undeniable glow in her eyes, the emotion finally transposing in a controlled manner. Sometimes, sir, she said, who seems insignificant, who remains invisible is exactly the power to change everything. He sat again, taking a deep breath, trying to absorb the magnitude of what he had just discovered. Every word of her echoed in her mind. Each gesture became a living memory of the day when her life was literally returned. The arrogance he carried so naturally aged seemed to melt in the face of reality, replaced by a mixture of gratitude, shock, and admiration. Clara, he said finally, his voice low, almost breaking, I don't know what to say. He looked deeply into his eyes. All my life, all power, all wealth, none of this compares to what you did for me. Nothing. I didn't need to, sir, she said humbly, but allowing a light smile to form on her lips. I knew it was necessary, and that was enough for me. He held her hand for a moment, as if the gesture were the anchor he needed to believe everything was real. I want to understand. He swallowed, still shaking slightly. Every detail, like you. Why? Clara took a deep breath, finally allowing himself to speak honestly. Because, sir, I knew you needed someone who was willing to act without waiting recognition. I knew that without me you would not have a chance to continue. I couldn't ignore it. The billionaire leaned, feeling an intense mixture of gratitude and unbelief. It changes everything. Every insult, every criticism, everything I thought was arrogance or lack of respect, now it seems ridiculous in the face of the truth. He took a deep breath, still absorbing every word. I never imagined you, the waitress before me, was responsible for my life. Clara just smiled slightly, keeping her posture firm, but allowing emotion to transparent. She knew that the impact of that moment would be eternal, not just for him, but for both. Every second of that moment carried an emotional weight that transcended the restaurant, the wealth and arrogance that once dominated the room. "Would you do the same if you were in my place?" muttered Clara, almost like a silent challenge, reminding the audience of the magnitude of the act. Comment what you think will happen now. The billionaire took a deep breath, feeling dominated by a mixture of emotions: gratitude, respect, repentance for the previous treatment, and a deep admiration for that woman who silently had saved her life. Every insult he had made now seemed irrelevant. Each superficial criticism became a memory of his own blindness in the face of the true importance of the people around him. He held her hands, finally allowing himself to look straight into his eyes. Clara, you have no idea what that means. All my life, all my fortune, none of this matters if I didn't have you." He paused, trying to soothe the magnitude of the moment. I want you to know that I will be eternally grateful, forever." Clara kept her serenity, but inside she felt a wave of relief, satisfaction and connection that had long awaited. The moment she had waited for months had finally arrived. The secret that he was carrying was now revealed, and the impact of his action transformed not only his life, but also the perception of everyone in the restaurant, even if they still didn't know exactly what had happened. And at that moment, the audience, silent and attentive, realized that something extraordinary had happened, an invisible act becoming visible, a secret turning into revelation, a saved life, and a connection that could never be forgotten. The billionaire remained still, the hand still holding the crystal glass, now cold between his fingers. Each word of Clara echoed in his mind, penetrating the layers of arrogance, pride and certainty that he had built over decades. The revelation that the woman in front of him, the same as he had repeatedly humiliated, had been responsible for saving his life, seemed too surreal to be assimilated immediately. He breathed hard, his tight chest, his eyes fixed on her, trying to decipher how that reality could coexist with everything he believed about himself. He began, his embargoed voice shaking as if it was the first time he pronounced a phrase without control. I never imagined, I could never imagine." He ran his hand over his face, his fingers shaking slightly. "All my life, my arrogance, my judgments, and all this." He paused, the voice almost a whisper. "And all this now seems insignificant." Clara kept her posture firm, her shoulders, the unshakable dignity. She did not need recognition to feel the importance of what she had done. Every second of humiliation suffered. Every insult supported in silence, every controlled gesture had been worth it, because he finally understood the magnitude of his own dependence on her. "Sir," she said calmly, allowing her voice to carry authority without arrogance, "some things only become clear when someone chooses to act without expecting anything in return. Some lives only survive because someone decides in silence to be responsible for the destination of and someone else." He swallowed hard, feeling shame and repentance mingle almost physically in his body. "Clara," she started, still unable to find the right words. I was, he sighed deeply, "a complete fool, an arrogant who didn't understand anything. I humbled you, treated you coldly with contempt, and—" He swallowed. "You saved my life." She leaned slightly, keeping control of the situation. "Sometimes, Lord, who seems insignificant is exactly who has the greatest power over our existence. Value each person around you, because you never know who can be your true savior." He felt the weight of those words like a straight blow to the chest. Every insult he had launched, every unfair criticism, every gesture of arrogance before her, is now reflected in her own repentance. I don't deserve it," he said, his voice almost breaking. "I don't deserve your generosity, your patience, everything you did for me." Clara smiled slightly, but it wasn't a smile of arrogance. It was the serene expression of someone who knew that justice, albeit silent, had been fulfilled. "Sir, this is not a deserving. It is a choice. Some people choose to do good without expecting recognition, without expecting rewards. It is this choice that defines someone's character, not riches, power, or social position." The billionaire took a deep breath, closing his eyes for a moment. Every second of that silence was loaded with emotion, shame, and an increasingly clear perception of his own fallibility. I will never look at anyone the same way." He took a deep breath, feeling his tightness in his chest slowly relieves himself. "And you taught me that without even wanting recognition." Clara kept her eyes firmly on him. "And Lord, this is how every human being should be treated, with respect, consideration, and humility. Because the true greatness is not what you have, but what you do, often invisible, but that can change everything. He swallowed hard, his mind working at all speed. Every gesture, every word of her, every moment he had treated her with contempt. Now she was reflected as a lesson he could not ignore. Clara. He took a deep breath, his shoulders falling, the arrogance finally melting at reality. I was blind to what really matters. He looked around, to the silent restaurant, to the attentive customers. I blocked myself for power, for pride, and I lost sight of what really is worth. That's it, sir, he answered clearly, gently but firmly. Life gives us lessons in different ways. Some painful, some silent, but all essential. And sometimes those we think are insignificant are, in fact, those who carry our destiny in their hands. He took a deep breath again, looking at her as if every second discovered new layers of its importance. I don't know how to thank you, he said, the voice loaded with emotion. Not just for what you did for me, but for what you represent. He ran a hand over his hair, trying to organize his thoughts. All my arrogance, all my wealth, all my sense of superiority, none of this matters when the truth is revealed. Clara maintained her serenity, allowing the emotion to manifest only in the eyes, the contained shine she carried. Sir, someone's true strength is not in wealth or power, but in the ability to act correctly, even when no one is looking. And you just learned it as directly as possible. He took a deep breath, feeling the tears accumulate in the eyes, but struggling to keep control at the intensity of the moment. I never again, he murmured. I will underestimate anyone. I will never judge someone again for the appearance, the position, or the position. Because, Clara, you taught me that life can depend exactly on those we don't realize, those we think are insignificant. She nodded slightly, allowing each word of him to fall as a confirmation of her own perspective. Sir, that's exactly what I wanted you to understand. The billionaire sat again, the heavy breath, the fixed eyes on her. He started, hesitating, the low voice. I want to correct everything. Every insult, every criticism, every gesture of arrogance. I want to compensate. I want to show that I understood. Clara smiled slightly, but she didn't need compensation. Their dignity and their patience had already imposed the lesson. Sir, true change does not require immediate compensation. It requires understanding, respect, and learning. What you show now is more valuable than any apology could be. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, his face near hers, his eyes shining with contained emotion. Every insult, every criticism, it seemed so small about what you did. He took a deep breath. I should have noticed before, but you were invisible to me so far. He laughed slightly, a mixture of shame and relief. How can I have been so blind? Sir, Clara replied, we all have times when we don't realize what really matters. Some realize early, other late. But the important thing is that you finally understood. He sighed deeply, feeling the weight of reality finally sit in his heart. I'll remember that forever. He ran his hand over his face, taking a deep breath, trying to organize his feelings. Each time I feel arrogant, every time I think I'm superior, I'll remember you, Clara, and what you did for me. She kept her posture firm, but allowed a slight smile to appear, not by arrogance, but for the feeling of silent justice now established. That's it, sir, she said. That's how everyone must realize the value of the people around you. Never underestimate anyone, because each person carries potential to turn lives, often without you realizing it. The billionaire took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of gratitude, shame, and reverence. Clara, you have no idea of the impact of all this. He leaned even more, his voice loaded with emotion. I owe my life to you, literally. And yet, you have maintained your dignity, your calm, even before all the humiliations I caused. Sir, said Clara, dignity does not depend on the treatment of others. It depends on our own choices, and I chose to act correctly, even when no one recognized. He took a deep breath, looking around to the silent hall, feeling the reality of what he had just found to penetrate every fiber of his being. I will never be the same again. Never again. He took a deep breath, feeling his heart beating tightly. Every person in front of me will now have my respect, and every action of mine going forward will be guided by this lesson you gave me. Clara just nodded, allowing him to completely absorb the magnitude of the moment. The silence settled, heavy but not uncomfortable. It was the silence of understanding, the deep impact of an act that had changed everything. "Would you do the same if you were in my place?" she muttered, almost like a challenge to the public. "Comment what you think will happen now." The billionaire took a deep breath, still processing every emotion, every memory, and every word of it. Finally, he lowered his head, recognizing not only his mistake, but the magnitude of her action. "Clara, you have not only saved my life," said the voice firm but loaded with emotion. "You saved my soul from arrogance, blindness, and pride. I will never forget." She smiled slightly, finally allowing herself to feel the silent satisfaction of those who knew the lesson had been learned. The public, even without understanding all the details, felt the strength of the message. Never underestimate anyone, never ignore those who seem invisible, because often their lives may be the one that sustains their own. The billionaire was still sitting, a fixed look in clear, trying to absorb every nuance of the revelation that had changed his life forever. Every gesture of it, every carefully measured word, now resonated with a weight impossible to ignore. He took a deep breath, feeling his heart accelerate, as if he was finally waking up to a new reality, a reality in which his arrogance and power were nothing in the face of the silent courage of those who really saved his life. Clara approached a little more, keeping her posture worthy, but allowing emotion to transparent in her eyes. She knew that the final moment was near, that the complete truth needed to be said to understand the depth of everything. "Sir," she said, lowering her voice but firm, "there is something that needs to hear clearly. You not only got a second chance. This second chance came straight from me. I was the donor who saved her life." The silence took over the hall, the till of cutlery, the murmurs of other customers, until the lightweight tinnitus of the air conditioner disappeared. He was still, the shock on his face. The arrogance that had defined his life, the pride that made him unattainable, evaporated in the face of that revelation. "You," he murmured, the embargoed voice, did it for me?" "For me." He took a deep breath, trying to organize the thoughts that seemed to spin on whirlwind. I owe you my life, and I didn't even realize." He squeezed his eyes, feeling tears about to fall. "I humiliated you so many times, and you saved my life." Clara kept the composure, but smiled slightly. The smile of those who knew that every insult, every arrogant gesture, every moment of disdain had prepared the ground for that unforgettable lesson. "Sir," she said firmly, "value each person around you. Never underestimate anyone, however quieter than it seems, because you never know who can be the true savior of your life." He took a deep breath, his tight chest, and finally stood up, kneeling almost symbolically before her. "Clara, I will never look at anyone the same way. Not only did I learn a lesson about humility, but about gratitude, about family, what really matters." He touched her hand softly. "You saved my life, literally, and it also saved my heart from the pride that blinded me." She nodded, feeling a wave of emotion that could finally be shared. The public, a silent witness to the scene, realized that this moment was not just about wealth or status, but about humanity, respect, and the invisible strength that some people carry. The message was clear. Great gestures often come from unexpected places, and those you least expect can have an impact that changes your life forever. The billionaire, now totally transformed, looked around the restaurant, his eyes shining in gratitude, and finally spoke with a clarity that no one had ever heard before. "I learned that power, Wealth and titles mean nothing if we have no humility to recognize the value of each person. Clara, you gave me more than a second chance. You gave me a lesson that I will take to the rest of my life. Clara smiled again, the emotion contained now radiating a silent peace. The public realized the impact of the story, the intensity of every detail, and the strength of the message that remained much after the words, "Never underestimate anyone." If this story has touched you, comment, "I believe in second chances." Leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and don't miss the next video on screen, because big lessons about billionaires, family, and humanity are just starting.